Welcome to Negotiation Made Simple, where we help you master the art of negotiation and win the next deal. I'm your host, John Lowry. On this episode, we are going to explore how skills that make a great choreographer are the same skills that make great negotiators. Now, those aren't two things that you would typically put together, but if you think about it, choreography and negotiation both involve communication, influence, creativity, leadership, and conflict resolution. And we're going to learn about some very specific strategies on how to do these things and do them in terms of creating an outcome that everyone can be satisfied with. And here to lead us in this conversation is Ryan Maag. Ryan is a world-renowned choreographer. He's done the NFL, he's done the Olympics, closing ceremonies, he's done a bunch of D-Day celebrations, amongst many other things. If you watch television or if you watch any sort of performances, chances are you've seen some of Ryan's work, but he's been behind the scenes, thinking creatively, coming up with a vision, working with people, and then making sure that it gets executed in a way that you didn't even notice all of the hard work that went into it. And what I'm excited about and what I want to ask you to listen for in this conversation is listen for some of those little things, paying attention to the details, how to do things from someone else's perspective, and the value that that can bring to you as a negotiator. Let's jump into this conversation with Ryan Maag.
Come from the dance world. So I grew up in dance theater, all of that. Then went on, learned very quickly at a young age that you make a lot more money actually creating it rather than dancing it.
Okay, interesting.
So I think that that's always fun. And then became creative in regards to choreography for dance. And my specialty was to choreograph large group.
Oh, wow.
And so that became a kind of a niche for me to go into that. And as I was building in choreographing for artists, for productions, for tours, for main label things, as that was growing, I started getting into the staging and creative direction side of things as well. And I've been honored to work on a lot of different projects with the NFL, did tons of creation with that. I was on the choreography team for the Olympics, closing ceremonies at Pyeongchang. I've done quite a few things. I was a creative director for the D-Day events with 5 different governments D-Day, both the 80th and 81st. And now building TSP and the playground, dealing with all of that here in Nashville. I think it's been fun because we're in the music industry world and staging artists and creating their creations and building tours and production and all of the things coming out of music development and doing that. And that's where we are now today. And it's just a whole plethora of things that we've gradually grown into. And I'm very grateful to be here today because now I'm here.
That's fantastic. Well, yeah, here you are, an international choreographer, and it's amazing that you've done things all the way from NFL to D-Day. Like, that's a huge range in terms of creating those kind of moments for people. But let's go to kind of the essence of what you do. Like, tell us, what is choreography at its core?
So I think it blends healthily with creative direction as well.
Okay.
So choreography, there's obviously the literal term of choreographing dance moves, but especially in the music industry, a choreographer doesn't necessarily mean that they're teaching the backup dancers or teaching dance moves or those type of things. Choreography could be just staging the artist, when to grab the microphone, when to stop walking on the stage, when to stand still, when to hold into that moment to deliver what their mission is. And I think that's why it blends healthily for our world with creative direction, is because you have to relay to the audience what the feeling and emotion in which the artist wants to relay. And part of that is it's very hard for an artist to be on stage delivering that and not understanding what it feels like to be on the flip side watching it and happen. And so I think that's probably our most difficult part, is going through that and building that and trying to teach them, well, it's not reading the way you think, and teaching them, especially we work heavily in the country music artist being in Nashville.
Yeah.
So trying to tell a country music artist that you're going to choreograph their staging doesn't go very well.
Yeah.
But they love it after a while because they get it and they understand, and teaching simple things that theater would understand is we all hear like stage right, stage left and everything else. But now when you're an artist, they don't necessarily understand those concepts. So it's like, okay, you're going to walk right because the audience reads left to right. So, there's like moments like that where you have to teach them that those relay well and come off better on certain parts of their show and what are big highlight moments and those type of things.
So it's so interesting to me, and I'm going to tell everyone the story where we met in just a second, because it was fascinating to kind of be in that moment and learn about what happened after the fact. But I love this concept of what you just said of like doing this from the perspective of how the other side sees it. In this case, the audience that's looking back at the stage. Correct. And how they're seeing and appreciating things. And that's a really important skill for negotiators in terms of thinking about as you make arguments, as you make presentations, as you are presenting your position, whatever the case might be, to do so from the perspective of how is the other side going to see it in a way that it's going to be most impactful on them. And so where I learned this and where I realized like this could be a really fun episode with Ryan is thinking about the Matthew Morrison event that recently was in Nashville that I had the privilege of going to, and that's where we met actually.
Yeah.
And I had no idea as just a lay audience member that entire show down to him getting a drink of water was choreographed.
Yeah.
And then what was really interesting to me was you then sharing how for a lot of artists, that's actually more comfortable for them than to just be allowed to kind of improvise and move across the stage. Talk a little bit about that in terms of just that level of detail and why that brings comfort to people.
Sure. Well, it adds for a seamless visual, appealing presentation is probably the best way to say that. And so often we see artists or we'll go see a show and, one of the biggest things I teach artists all the time is don't turn your back on the audience because, a lot of times they'll turn around to grab a drink of water in between songs, but they don't realize that you just killed the moment of that flow for the audience.
Yeah.
And what you want to do is design a show that never has the audience turn to start talking to their person next to them. We've all been in shows where we were just encapsulated by what was happening on that stage or what was happening. And so that is our goal for the whole 90 minutes, that you just don't want to grab your phone. You don't want to talk to anybody next to you. You want to just enjoy and sink into that moment. Well, every artist has their own art. And I think that that's different, for everybody. And I you bring up negotiating. I think that that's really important to understand is know your audience. And I think knowing your audience is like the biggest key to anybody because, music is like a painting at a museum. We've all walked into a painting and seen it on the wall and we go, oh yeah, I wouldn't pay $5 for that. But then by the way, it's in the Smithsonian for $5 million, and you're like, well, that's not my style. That's not what I like. Music is the same, and so they have their strict believers, their strict followers, their strict, all of their diehard fans, as we say. But now I've got as a goal as a creative director to entertain the non-believer, the non-follower, the one that's not just there to listen to their sound or their music, but we now have to make it appealing, and not every artist. I think there's only one on the planet, arguably, that could stand there and just sing for 90 minutes and never move, and that's Chris Stapleton. And every other artist in the world, you need to move. You got to do something.
Choreography needed for,
he's amazing vocally, and that's why we're all there to listen, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's just kind of a beautiful moment that we see. And so I think knowing your audience and doing that, and just like Matthew Morrison's a great example. He's an artist that has refined his art and he gets it. He knows he's been on Broadway since he was, gosh, 16, 17, I don't know.
Sure.
But 100 years is what I would jokingly tell him. But the reality is that is it. And you've got to make sure that the show never stops. The show never flows. No one wants to see you out of breath. No one wants to see you sweating it out there and doing everything. So you choreograph it in. You give your time to breathe. Let your band have their moments. Let them have that. And that's what we mean by choreography. So yet again, it's not just about a dancer or just about a dance move.
Yeah. Well, it's so fascinating, just all the parallels that exist there. And the whole idea of especially in this day and age, when you're thinking about negotiation, attention becomes very important. And you just described how you all carefully manage people's attention. And that becomes critical in negotiation as well, because, I call it deal momentum. And sometimes you have a lot of momentum to get that deal done. If you miss that moment, it's really hard to make it happen again.
100%.
And same kind of thing, you get momentum with a show. You don't want to kill it with someone going to get a drink of water. And the parallels are really, really powerful there. So it all begins with a vision. And negotiation's the same way, to where it begins with, what are we looking to get? What do we want to get out of this deal? Or how do we see solving this problem? And someone has to have that vision and ultimately kind of get people around that vision. Talk a little bit about your process of when you get an idea from a creative direction standpoint, and now all of a sudden you've got to get people around that idea and begin putting things in place to where you're engineering that idea to ultimately become a reality that happens in front of the camera or on stage.
That's actually not much different than negotiating, the way you just said it. I think everybody has a vision or what it is, and we start our process with the communication with the artist and their teams, and what do they want to relay? What do they want their music to feel? What do they want to do? And an artist has a set list, right? So their set list has to be arranged in a way to invoke a different emotion throughout the journey, because nobody wants to walk out on the stage and start with their best song they've ever done, because then we have nowhere to go. And then, if you hit the stage with your worst song you've ever done, then we don't know where to go. Yeah. And so it takes them on a journey, and it's maybe not it's emotion. I think we work with various different artists. For example, we have an artist that is a veteran, and he does not want to be known as, I'm a veteran who does music. I want to be known as a musician who happened to be a veteran. And so the key to that is, you don't walk out there and say, welcome to my show, and then start your song with your veteran music. That's not the way it's going to drive, but we can create that moment. And so I think we call it arcing a show, and you're arcing the path through the emotion. And I think in, comparison terms, and what you're stating with negotiation is, I would imagine you're negotiating constantly what's going to grab them and through that. And we all know that in any world, any industry, we're emotionally driven. We're human. Yeah. So we love all the senses to be nurtured. And, that's why it's a big thing when we, these things happen. And right now in our world, in our society, and everything that's happening, we want a big hug world. Yeah. We want a feel-good moment. We want, there's so much divide. There's so much hatred. There's so much negativity. And I think that when you buy a ticket to a show, that's the last thing you want to feel. You want to go there and feel like, this is what aligns with necessarily, it's not a political thing. It's not a belief thing. It's more about an emotion thing, and that I'm human. We've all been through it. And I think we've never really had a moment coming out of like COVID or all of that, and taking this moment to like really take a journey for everyone. And I think it's been what I've seen as a common thing in the entertainment business, is that just making sure that audience gets to feel like they matter and they're here for you, and this is what it is. And let alone the artist wants to feel that as well, And so I think that would be a tactic that I would say is so important. It's just making sure you're invoking emotion throughout the whole thing, not just a part of it.
Yeah, those emotions are huge. And, there's research that comes out of Harvard that says that 70% of business decisions are based on emotion, not reason or logic. And so that just shows kind of how important emotions are. In entertainment, you have lots of levers to pull in terms of, invoking emotion. Sometimes in negotiation, you don't have as many levers to pull, but the really sophisticated negotiators are the ones that are paying attention to emotions. The mistake that a lot of negotiators make, and maybe some entertainers as well, is to think, well, if they like my music, they'll like my show. Well, not necessarily.
That is a big misconception. Yes, correct.
And I mean, you got to present the music in such a way that not only do they like their music, but they like your show. And a lot of that has to do with how you interact and embrace the people. And it's the same in negotiation, where you have arguments, you have information, you have positions and everything that you want to communicate, but it's critical that you strategically think about how you're going to do that in such a way that people are going to emotionally be at a place to where they can receive it, and that it gets communicated in a way that builds them up and takes them to a place emotionally where you want them to go. You challenge their ego, they're more inclined to say no.
Yeah.
You build their ego, they're more inclined to say yes.
Yep. It's dead on.
So let's talk about moments where you have the vision and you're confident in the vision in terms of it being the way to do this. And you talked about, doing large group choreography and creative direction. And this is probably more prevalent in large group, to where you have people that challenge your vision. You have folks that don't believe in it. And yet at the same time, they're critical to executing it. How is it that you deal with people that challenge your vision or your direction or your ideas? How do you deal with them effectively?
I think contrary to your statement, in the fact I think that the large group, it actually is easier.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And
tell me why.
my thought being, because as you go into it, is they already know you're in charge and they follow the masses.
Okay.
Right?
Got it.
So you stand in front of a group of 700 performers, and they know I'm there and I'm the one making the decision. So there's really not a lot of argumentative pushback ever.
Okay.
But where it does is when you're doing artist development or idea or brand development for an artist, and creating those things, because now it's a one-on-one. And now it's my brand versus what your idea is. And I think that sometimes artists have in their head, or creative in general have in their head, on what they think is best. And without being egoic, I have to be able to say, no, I know what's best. And I think that's the hardest part, is because trying not to come off, because am I the know-all end-all of the music business? No, probably not. But, but I've definitely been around enough and established enough that I'm able to push through on some receipts, as we say, and be able to say it that way. But the reality is, I think that's it. It's that you do have to negotiate through that moment to be able to say, no, this is what it is. Because I never want to turn to any artist and say, no, this is what I said you got to do, and that's why you got to do it. And I don't care if you like it or not. That I would never do that. I think you have to be happy, or you won't be able to sell what you're selling. It's convincing them that you know what's best, and that you're there for the better intentions of them and their brand. And I think that's a big deciding factor for sure.
So let's get real practical and tell folks, how do you do that? What is the process that you use to try to, work through those disagreements?
I think I know. Well, this is gonna. I'm giving all my secrets away. That would not be okay. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think especially in the creative world, we're emotionally driven. As you said earlier, 70% of businesses' decisions are emotionally driven. I think it's that way. Even probably 95% of every decision in the music industry or in the entertainment industry is emotionally driven.
Okay.
So I would use those emotions in which I know they thrive on, and in all sense of the word, against them. In the sense, if I know they're wanting to relay an emotion, then now I'm going to utilize that factor to say, this is how you're going to relay that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they never said it, I now know that I'm playing on a point or a pinpoint that is important to them. I.e., if someone said, I want this song to feel like it's a breakup, but it feels like a death, then how do we relay that? Because that song comes across as different to everyone. I think about Coldplay, Fix You. This incredible, iconic song. What it means to you might not be what it means to me. But the key is, if I was sitting here talking to Chris, I want to know what exactly it meant to him when he wrote the song and when we sing the song and what it does, and how do I relay that to the audience. But then there's this world of you have to let go of that too, because if someone interprets it different, then you have to allow them to have their own interpretation. And I think that's that angle to get in, to sway them to be like, we have to allow other people to experience that. I think Pink said it best. She said she never tells people why she wrote a song or why she does a song, because it's now their song once they listen to it. And I think I wish every artist had that mind frame.
Okay. Interesting. So what I heard you just say, and this is actually really useful, is, there's some disagreement in terms of the idea. You seek to align in terms of the purpose. I mean, what you were talking about in terms of, what is it that you're trying to communicate here? What did this mean for you when you kind of wrote the song? All that kind of stuff. You're trying to align in purpose. And then you're exploring what openness there is in terms of how to get there. And if there's openness, then there's room for lots of ideas to come, but you stay grounded and aligned around the purpose in terms of what you're seeking to accomplish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. You've got to be in that alignment factor in everything you do. But when they disagree or they go, no, I want to do this though. And you're like, oh, I don't know, and I think that's kind of the key, that you can have an artist that wants to do something and it's just not coming through, but there's this hard moment where you have to pull them aside. I think it's a vulnerability of an artist too. And I think when you can play on vulnerability, that helps a little bit. And I think allowing them to be vulnerable, for us, especially the bigger the artist, the less they want to show vulnerability, because surprisingly, even though it's a rehearsal, there's still a janitor in the building. There's still people that are sitting around, lighting techs and engineers and everybody that's sitting there for this rehearsal, and they're watching an artist make a really bad decision or mess up. So I think that's when a creative director lands that moment, is they seize it, you grab them, you remove them from the situation where it becomes a one-on-one conversation very quickly, so they don't lose the belief of everyone around them.
Yeah.
And then being able to say, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to do this? This is what's happening, blah, blah, blah. So I think communication is so key.
Yeah. I mean, what I heard of what you just said there is this, sometimes you have to, this is kind of using a choreography example, but sometimes you have to kind of reset the stage. And you got to say, okay, these characters, they need to go off stage for a while. Right now, it just is me and the artist to really talk about and align around purpose, and then we'll invite others kind of back into that.
Agreed.
And so that lesson is really, really powerful for folks, because the mistake that I've observed people make, especially in where there's, kind of high emotion, is they just react to the idea. And what they do is they miss the level of the alignment of purpose, and they make a bunch of assumptions that usually they're not right. And even if they are right, they may not be productive.
Sure.
They're trying to ruin the show. No, they're not. They're just, and it's the same thing in terms of what happens is people go, oh, they're crazy. And you're like, no, not crazy. They just have interest just like you have interest. And you got to work through the process to try to discover those and then think creatively about how to solve for them. So that's where I want to go next, is really thinking about creativity. Okay, talk just a little bit about, if you were just to step back and you were like going to go Matrix, to where you were like going outside of yourself and you were watching yourself do what you do from a very creative standpoint. Like, how would you describe that process for people? Like, what do you do to bring creative ideas to life?
Oh, wow. For me, I draw on energy.
Okay.
Very much so. I find it very difficult for me to be most creative when any group, artist, whoever I'm working with doesn't give the energy back, I can't want it more than you.
Okay.
And that's hard. And that has been a case multiple times. So I've had to learn to draw on inner energy. So I'm able to teach or be able to direct and coach through that lack of energy on their side. And I think the lack of energy sometimes comes from ego. Sometimes it comes from, just their, inner side, or they're dealing with something, or they have all of that stuff. So I think that's a huge thing. How to relay that, how I'm watching myself do that is, and then it's about layout for me. It's about a big 30,000-foot visual. I've got to look at this from a different perspective, in all perspectives. And I think that is the hardest part, because anybody can watch something and go, oh, that's beautifully done. But does it look beautiful in the rafters at the $30 seats? Or, how do you relay that through television? I mean, that's huge too, and I think when I go to choreograph something for the NFL, like those are huge stadiums. So when you have a dancer in the middle of a field, and they do a small movement, nobody can see it.
A lot gets lost.
It gets so lost. So hence why, a lot of the NFL cheerleaders and dance teams, they have large palms, very visual extenders to their arms. So the motions, they also wear their hair down so they can, you can see when they turn their head, because then the hair, we call it hairography actually. So it adds this moment to be able to go, okay, they turned their head and they've whipped their arms, hence that's the palms that they have, because it adds these visual elements to the show that you would not see if their hair was tight up in a bun and there didn't have palms. So it's just, those are know your crowd. But then if you watch, more NBA style, that's kind of in and more secluded. So those dancers don't always have palms, because you can see those movements a lot better. And you can see those things. And then you worry about that. And I think with artists, if you have backup dancers, you got to worry about so many different visual things. So that's be the next thing. If I was working on a set with artists, you want to make sure the dancers don't outlook the artists. And that could be better looking. It could be taller. In some cases, if an artist is not as in shape as possible, then you wouldn't want killer in shape dancers surrounding the artist, because it would actually make the artist look worse. And so you've got to play into all of those factors. And if you're not, then, that it is all about that visual standpoint.
Yeah.
So that's that.
So a lot of impression management that's going on.
Yeah.
And again, you're doing it from the perspective of the people that are watching and having an appreciation for the impressions they will have if you present it this way or that way. The hairography thing is fascinating. Like, that's really cool. I will now think of that every time
you watch the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. You're going to go, like, oh, yeah.
I know why their hair's down.
Let
me tell you. Trivia, kids.
That's right.
They'll be like, yeah, Dad, you've lost it. Okay, one of the things I want to talk about, because again, I think it's very, very similar, is, in negotiation, most of the negotiations that I'm involved in, there's a lot of constraints. In my negotiations in the legal world, I don't get to choose the facts. So I'm constrained by the facts. And that makes these problems very difficult to solve, and there's nothing I can do about it. In your world, I would guess there's also many constraints.
Yes.
And so how is it that you actually use the constraints to foster more creativity?
I think actually it helps.
That's kind of what I'm going.
Yeah, it does, because it causes you to be better and stronger and think faster and harder. I think one of the largest constraints we have in especially in the entertainment business is money. I think people don't realize that. They think, oh, because you're a big artist, you automatically get, all the things. But people don't realize that it, minimum costs you $15 million to do a show at the Sphere.
Oh, wow.
And so that's a great deal, but it's a hard deal. That's a lot of money. And the LED walls and the staging to travel, depending on how many trucks are permitted for that artist, because the budgets are designed around truck sizes and how many trucks you have. And so, it could limit so much creativity very quickly. So then you have to be creative with the tools you have. And what does that look like? And how do I do that? And what do we have? And then I think the other restraint that we have is lack of talent. So I think that's been something that has been very prevalent, more so now that we have social media, because I think you have artists that have started and built their whole entire career around incredible vocals and incredible things. But now an artist could just have 1 million followers and now all of a sudden they have a record deal, and that doesn't mean they can know how to sing.
Yeah.
Or they know how to perform.
Sure.
And I think that's a big deal because I've been there. I've been hired to work with artists to help learn how to help perform a stage show. Because, in fact, I had an artist that had a little over 2 million followers, got a record deal, opening act for a major, major artist, had never done a show before in their life. They've only been on their bed with a guitar and have all the following. Incredible vocals, incredible artists.
Yeah.
But the reality is they don't know how to do a show. They've never performed with a live band. They don't know what it's like to have a drum set behind them 4 feet.
Yeah.
And then how much stage do I have and where do I work? And so I think that's where our business really thrives is under those restraints, you start to learn, okay, here's how we can make you look this way. There's also, I had an artist that out of nerves, she would cross her legs as she was standing just by her stance, but that looks weird to an audience member.
Yeah.
So the key was, okay, instead of us trying to learn how to uncross your legs, go ahead and get nervous. It's fine. We're just going to put a long dress on you. And then I'm going to make sure you're in boots. And that way, when you cross the leg, the visual is not lost.
Interesting.
It's like things like that where you have to, that's a restraint to me because I would love it if she would do what I told her, not to do. That doesn't happen. So you have to, those are some unique, I think, restraints that you have to work through. And you're like, okay, this makes sense. And I think it's okay. Yet again, it's allowing the artist to be vulnerable, but yet you're helping them in their perception to the world. And I think that restraints are in everything, and especially for developmental artists. I mean, gosh, it's so expensive to get in this business.
I mean, that's a little bit of like Carrie Underwood's story, isn't it? Like when she won American Idol, she was not like a polished performer ready for the big stage.
No.
And yet here she is, got millions of people following her, excited to go see her perform, and yet someone made a performer out of her because she got it.
It's a whole team. And it takes a lot of work. I mean, to go from that, and you never know what song's going to pop off. And that's the crazy part about it is you might have an artist that's their third song out, but all of a sudden it goes to 2 million streams, and you're like, okay, well that's kind of cool. And the next thing you know, it's 100 million streams. And the next thing you know, oh my gosh, we charted on Billboard. Oh, now they want them to open for this artist, and now they want to do a duet with this artist. And you're like, they're not ready. They just released their third song ever. Yeah. And so it's a rush game to get in there and get them going, because when it happens quick.
Yeah. So as we're thinking about kind of overcoming the constraints with creativity, one of the things that, I tell folks is, they'll call me and be like, okay, John, here's the problem. They want this, we want this, we're screwed. And you're like, hold on. Like, the process is just getting started. We got a long way to go. And many times, not always, but many times there's a third solution that kind of emerges in all of these. It's not just they want this and it's got to be either or. And so talk a little bit about moments you've seen where, as you've allowed the creative process to progress, a new idea emerged that ultimately was the winner, that wasn't part of the original conversation or the original vision.
I think a lot of that has to play into the restraints a little bit, because the restraints guide you down, and then you get out there and you're like, oh, we can't do that. There's been a lot of moments where that happens, and you have a plan, and then it doesn't go through, so you have to adjust very quickly. I think that's a normal thing for us on a day-to-day. And I jokingly always tell our team it's on an hour-to-hour, because you never know what you're getting when you're getting. I'll wake up in the morning and have no idea what that day is going to lay out, because we work in the entertainment business, and it changes literally minute by minute. So I think that navigating through those changes, I think there's stories when you get there, one of the trucks gets in an accident, and now all of a sudden we're half the production that we had for the show that is in a sold out stadium that night, or, it's missing trusses or missing those things. Like, how do we adjust? How do you pivot? I think one of the really interesting parts is Sooner, my business partner, we do Coldplay. So she does a lot of that. And what is really unique that you don't understand is like them setting up their show and their stadium show in Nissan Stadium is one thing. But then to turn around and play Roman Coliseum in Rome, whole different setup. But you got to still relay the same show, the same stuff. So going in and changing that, and how does that work, and how do you fit it, to redesign or do all those things. I think that's really an incredible factor that you have to be able to navigate through all those changes. And for that.
Yeah, I love that concept because, it's so true in negotiation where, you can't just do the same thing every time and expect the same result. And so what you just described, the Coliseum and Nissan Stadium are two different venues that require different solutions.
Yeah.
And if you're not dynamic enough to be able to produce those solutions, then the show is not going to feel the same.
Right.
Or the result is not going to be the same.
Right.
And so it's important for people to remember, like, we have a vision for what we want to accomplish, and we're unwilling to compromise in terms of that vision, but we may have to be very flexible in terms of how we get there.
I think it's doing that. I mean, in fact, you saw the Matthew Morrison show at City Winery here. And that stage at City Winery is, I believe, 16 feet, wide or whatever. But then he gets to Studio Below 54, Studio 54 Below or whatever it's called, in New York City. Well, the stage is 8 by 8 feet. So now all of a sudden that whole show that you designed and moved all restraints to move 2 feet this way instead of 8 feet this way, and move this, and that's why it takes a pro artist to be able to understand how to adjust and relay those things. So
how do you make decisions? This is really important in every negotiator's world as well. How do you make decisions on when to compromise and when to hold your ground?
Oh, that is a really good question. I think you hold your ground when you feel like you're compromising integrity of the project and or the artist and or what we're doing. I've had held my ground multiple times, and I think in those statements, it's when you turn to the team and you pull a meeting, a private meeting, or whatever you do, and it's more about saying, why did you hire me? Talk me through that. Let's start there. And you hired me because you want me to do what? And they explain, and I cannot do that if we go this direction. I cannot do my job. And I think so often that is a big pull point. And that's when the artist gets their aha moment. That's when dancers understand that, like, you can walk in and you're like, I understand that this feels weird. I promise you it's not. You've got to trust me. You've got to do it this way because it will relay better, on those things. But then there's a lot of times where you have to be flexible. There's times we joke, what hill do you want to die on? Say, because, especially when they have it in their head, what they want to do. And as a creative director, you have to make decisions like, what is your profile picture on your social media? That's really low on the totem pole to what song order is going to be in your show. Like, those are some different things, but we still have to weigh in on all those decisions. And so I think they'll come and they'll say, well, I want this picture. And I'm like, it does not look anything like your marketing brand. So I'm going to say no, but if you want it, we'll go ahead and do it. It's those type of moments.
Yeah. So we talked about a bunch of really good stuff here. Do you have a story that kind of encapsulates all this that you can share that is an interesting story for us that kind of highlights everything we've talked about?
I don't know. I think what's really interesting to me is I would say working with the D-Day creative events. I have a really interesting story because I was heavily a part of the 80th anniversary and the 81st anniversary. The 80th was under the Biden administration. and the 81st was under the Trump administration.
Okay.
So I experienced both sides of the world, honestly, both sides of this, and maybe not even from a political standpoint, like people would immediately think. It was more about structural and organizational standpoint. And I've stood in rooms where I call them pinch me moments, because that was the 80th. I was standing in a room and it was literally Joe Biden, Jill Biden, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, General Chris Donahue, Nancy Pelosi, and I'm standing there going, wow, if anything happened in the world right now, these are the people that would be making all the decisions that would happen, right? It was just a really interesting factor, and to stand there and to feel that environment, to feel their organization, to feel how it goes, to the feeling you get when you're standing in the room with Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio and their wives or whatever, and it's this, ironically the same general, but it's just very interesting in the feel that I got. But what was beautiful is both were celebrating the World War II veterans. Both were there for no political stance, no political statements, but it was just watching that happen. So I think, yet again, I talked earlier in this about knowing your audience and knowing what you're playing for. That was a huge moment of a life lesson where you have to know your audience. You have to know what you're doing and what works for this type of memorandum or this type of stuff. It's not going to work for this side. And it was really interesting. We were, for the first time first year, all the countries were very celebratory and all a part of everything. And the second year, almost all the countries pulled out. And it was just us, and they had their own celebration. And that was because of their belief or dislike of the Trump administration, which, you have to just do your job. That's why you're hired, know. But it's very interesting to me. I've learned so much about that. I think that's really a do tell. And I think I've had my fair share of international experiences, especially with the Olympics and doing those things, because every country is so different and people don't realize that. I think, especially from a creative entertainment perspective, I think it's disciplines are so different.
So as you've traveled the world and done all of these kind of huge events, what would you say is probably one of the most important lesson or two that you've learned about negotiation?
I would just say, I'm going to stick to know your audience, know what you're negotiating and who you're negotiating. I think that's the biggest key. If I was going to sit down and negotiate with anybody and on any term or anything, I want to know everything about them. I want to know where you come from, what you're thinking, what are your emotions, why are you here, what do you expect me, what's the end goal? I got to know all that before I'll even negotiate. Otherwise, there's no point, and I think negotiating my belief, negotiating my creativeness, negotiating what my thoughts are, I want to know the end game. I want to know why we're here. I want to know why we're spending the energy on it.
All right, we'll end on kind of a light, fun note.
Great.
I'm curious about all of this stuff from your perspective. Okay, so as a choreographer, a creative, someone who knows this world so well, what's your favorite Broadway show?
Oh no, you would what? Oh my gosh, it's such a multi-answer. I'm shocked because I'm a huge Broadway fan. I'm like, I did not expect that question at all. I'm like, is it my favorite production, my favorite lighting, my favorite vocals, my favorite all those things? So, but I will say I did just get a chance to see Unhappily Ever After, or maybe a Happy Ending. That's what it's called. Okay. Maybe a Happy Ending. And the production was the most incredible production I've ever seen in my life. Wow. And it just took us in a whole different direction. But vocally, I have to still stand with Color Purple with Cynthia Erivo and Jennifer Hudson, original cast. Yeah. That was life-changing to watch that. So those would be my two, if I could answer two.
Okay. Well, we'll let you get by with just two. I'm sure there's
that's good.
many. All right. Couple of just kind of last questions about choreography and dance. What would you say is kind of the biggest misconception that people have when they watch a show that has been choreographed?
I think you nailed it earlier. I hope they don't have any conception.
Oh,
I
okay.
think that they think it's natural. And they think that it's all just being done, but they don't realize every single step is planned out. Every single thing on a true show, especially even your bigger artists that are out there doing shows all the time. And I think that's just it is in, I say the old days, but a long time ago, the artist was on the stage and they would have that guy up in this rafter with the spotlight that would follow the artist wherever the artist decided to go. That doesn't exist anymore. They're plotted out. They know where the artist got to go because the stage might be opening up because we're lowering it or raising or lowering a piano from the stage back on. You got to stay where you're supposed to stay and do not go anywhere else or you'll fall into a hole and it will not be okay. There's all of those things. So I think that just the art of people not having any sort of conception on it is really cool.
That's great.
A beautiful part.
Well, Ryan, thanks so much for stopping by.
Yeah,
appreciate your insights and your wisdom. Always amazed by the parallels that exist. And again, today, so many parallels between choreography and creative direction and negotiation. And I think the reason is because these processes are about people.
Yeah.
And they're about people's emotions and they're about who people are kind of at their core in terms of how they think, how they feel, and how they decide to do things. And that's why there's such commonality in terms of what you do and I do, even though people enjoy what you do a lot more than what I do. And that's definitely fair. So with that, thanks so much for being a part of Negotiation Made Simple.
Thank you.
Ryan Maag has just dropped on us a bunch of nuggets that I think can be really valuable to us as negotiators. I love that idea of what he talked about very early on in the conversation about making sure that you're thinking about everything you do from the other's perspective and how you want them to think and how you want them to feel and what you want them to do. And what that means is you've got to get down to a level of detail in terms of making sure that your presentation, your communication is done in such a precise way that the other side is open to embracing the message that you are trying to deliver. Love that thinking from the other side's perspective. And then he also talked about the importance of sequencing information. And he talked about the arc that is used in choreography. Well, that is so true for negotiation as well. You want to be very strategic in how you sequence the information. If you start with the punchline, then you may not have anywhere to go. And if you start there and then follow it with a bunch of information, now all of a sudden that information may not get the attention that you want. And so sequencing information becomes really, really important. And then the last thing he talked about was this idea of knowing your audience and making sure that we understand who it is that we're negotiating with and what it is that will cause them to make a decision one way or the other. What is it about their background that will impact that? How is it that we can discover that so that we can use it to try to connect with them and in addition to that, to influence them to make the decision that we want? One of the last things that really stood out about this conversation for me was this whole idea of aligning with purpose. And the notion of when there's disagreement, go to align on purpose first, and then negotiate some openness to how we accomplish that purpose. And that leaves room for creative ideas to come to the table, yet keeps people together, working together, even though there's some disagreement that divides them. Some great ideas here from Ryan Maag on the Negotiation Made Simple podcast. Thanks for listening, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.